All right, we'll get started here. I feel like we gave everybody the necessary time to hop on, and if not, the session will be recorded. Um, Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's fireside chat from prospect to player, a recruiting conversation. My name is Sean Gracie. I'm excited to be here with all of you on behalf of Red Devils Lacrosse for what promises to be an engaging as well as an insightful discussion. We are honored to have with us James Chakey, assistant coach at Brown University. Um, a highly respected figure in college lacrosse and someone who truly understands what it takes to succeed at the next level. For those of you who don't know, Coach Chakey, he joined the Brown men's lacrosse staff in July of 24 and is gearing up for his first season with the program in 25 under the leadership of head coach John Torpy. Before arriving at Brown, Coach Chakey spent the 24th season as an assistant coach at High Point University, where he helped lead a defense ranked in the top half of the NCAA. Prior to that, he spent 2 seasons coaching at the Division III perennial power Washington College. Those of you who've been around a game know that program quite well. And also spent an extensive amount of time in North Carolina with the Red Devil Lacrosse program as well as Carolina National. As a player, Coach Chakey had an impressive collegiate career at Penn State, where he was a 4-year letter winner, recipient of the Big Ten Sportsmanship Award, and earned the prestigious True Grit Award for his resilience and commitment to the game. Tonight, Coach Chakey will share his unique perspective on the recruiting process, offer some valuable insights into what it takes to go from being a high school prospect to a thriving collegiate player. We are super excited to have you with us, Coach, and thank you for being with us here tonight and taking the time out of your schedule and your new young family to be with us. So can't thank you enough.
Yeah, no, thanks, Sean. Thank you, Scott, as well. Like, for those of you who don't know, when I moved to North Carolina, I met Scott in a Panera, and I was too nervous to order food, and I was starving the whole time. And he ordered food and ate right in front of me, and we sat there for 2 hours and talked lacrosse for 2 hours. And so I've known Scott for a long time, and then he paired me with Coach Gracie as our first like summer team, and we hit the ground running. So I've known Sean and Scott for a long time, and both came to my wedding. Had a blast. I watched from afar, that's for sure. And then our families have got to know each other a ton. So when I had this opportunity, I was really excited to jump on and share really anything. I mean, I talked with Sean briefly before this call, and I love the questions that he showed me a little bit. You guys are going to ask, and we'll kind of take it from here. But I'm excited for tonight.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And that wedding was a blast, by the way. I got a lot of dancing in, cut up that rug, that's for sure. To start, I'd like to ask you a little bit about your recruiting philosophy. What qualities do you look for in players you recruit? What type of individual stands out to you as a great fit for your program?
Yeah, it's me personally. I like guys that are really gritty, tough, and it doesn't necessarily mean you've got to run through 4 guys to score a goal or take every shot that comes your way. I look at guys in between, in the middle of the field, right? I look at attackmen who ride their butts off. I look at goalies that aren't afraid to play like the high crease and not just worry about being between the pipes, but um, not being afraid with the ball on their stick too, to come out of the crease and use their feet as goaltenders to kind of shift the riding defense. And then, looking at midfielders, LSMs in the middle of the field, just guys that hustle. Like, you don't have to be the most athletic guy on the team, but there's some players I'll kind of point out that I've coached, like John Adams from High Point University. He's a fifth year there. Like he was probably one of our least athletic defensemen, but one of the toughest dudes. Like didn't let anything bother him. Hustled all the time. He wasn't afraid to dive for loose balls or trails or anything like that. And he was a starter for us last year. He's going to start for them this year. And he's a good example. And then there's the other side of it where I've got a guy this year named Charlie Cave, who was a third team All American last year, LSM, and he's a freak, but he's only 5'9", right? Like he's tough, man. He runs really hard and plays hard, gets on and off the field hard. He'll cover anybody I ask him to. He's great with his stick. He just does everything right from a coach's perspective, and all coaches are different. So, midfielders, like just making simple A to B decisions. And then if something goes wrong, not hanging your head or jogging off or like pausing and watching, but like trying to get that ball back. So toughness is huge. And then on the close defenseman, what I kind of look for is I don't necessarily need the guy who's going to take somebody's head off, but I need the guy who's willing to put his hands on somebody
Right.
to slow someone down in a good spot, right? So not the guy that needs to do a takeaway check right over the head or even throw pokes and slaps every single time. It's like I like guys that can just get dudes between their hands and drive into the corners and be super simple and then snap back in and play off ball and talk to their teammates, right? So kind of just ran from goalie all the way down to, the attack and then face off guys. I'll be totally honest. I have no idea how to recruit face off guys. Like if it were up to me, it'd probably be the worst face off team in the country. Luckily we have a guy who's very, very good at that. But guys like that, who are those skill guys, getting on and off the field really hard, right? Having a great IQ for the game. That's kind of what I look for in face-off guys. And I'm starting to learn, but every time I finally figure it out, they change the rules. So there's a lot of coaches like me out there that are still figuring that position out.
Seems like it'll always be moving in at that position. So it sounds like, Coach, like this a lot has to do with mentality. Your mentality when you play the game, not so much about how you play it, but the mentality that you bring to a given position that has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, it's everything. It's how a player carries himself walking to the field to get ready. Like once he laces his cleats up, like me personally, if I'm bored with a game, I don't like. You'll see at events like a lot of coaches get up at halftime and they move. Right. I like staying at the same spot. And this is me personally. Every coach is different, but I like sitting in the same spot and during halftime, seeing how the team that's coming on next, doesn't even matter what age. It's like, who's the guy that's the most focused on that team from truly once they step on the turf and what they're talking about on the sidelines. Like, are they locked in? Are they talking about the new video game that's out? Are they talking if they're talking lacrosse, that's good stuff too. Right. And then you got your guys that just are watching the game as well in front of them. And they might be excited when something happens, but they're engaged. So, it starts truly from when your feet touch the turf or you arrive at the facility. And it's the mentality of like, I'm here for a couple of reasons, right? And we'll probably dive into those later. But at the end of the day, you're there to get better. And that's it could be from a mental standpoint or to your point, Sean, just from a mental and physical toughness of just doing the right thing, listening to your coaches, being coachable, hustling, all those different things. And I could go on a tangent I could do the whole hour and a half on just that. But it comes down to mentality and discipline and accountability. And there's a lot of different things. You're going to hear a lot of like hot words come out of my mouth and I can dive into them. But so it starts with the mentality and just the discipline of being coachable and doing the right thing for your team.
Right. Now you've had, as I was mentioning earlier, you've had the unique opportunity to recruit at various levels of collegiate lacrosse. Now at Brown in the Ivy League, previously at High Point at the Division I level, and at Washington College at the Division III level. How does your approach to recruiting differ from your experiences at WAC all the way through to now at Brown?
Yeah, this question is always funny for me because I've probably had the best case scenario when it comes to a coaching timeline on the recruiting side. So I'll start with where I started. I started at Washington College, and when Coach Nostrand got the job, and he when he got it, he coached me in high school. I think we were actually in Philadelphia with Carolina National, and I was excited for him. And I shot him a call. I said, "Hey, listen, I got a spreadsheet of 30 guys that are really good for like the Division III level." And he called me back 2 minutes later. He's like, "Hey, do you want the job?" I'm like, "What job?" He's like, "The assistant coach job." So that's kind of how it happens. But when I took that position, we were at a school where there was only 38 guys on the team. And in Division III and Division II, lacrosse is, believe it or not, more of a revenue generating sport. So the athletic director said, "Listen, we got to get this number back up to 50." I'm like, "Well, is there a cap?" And he's like, "No." I'm like, "Okay." So Division III, it's situational, but there's a lot more teams out there. So when I first started recruiting, the first ask was, we need bodies. We don't need to be a Centennial Conference champion, or national contender in one year. It was more so like, we need to build this program back up. So there's a lot of programs that kind of depend on the revenue generation at Division III, where you might be a young player and receive like 100 emails from Division III programs, and you really have to do your research, because some of those are going to be very well respected programs, like the Washington colleges, the Washington Elite. If you've got fantastic grades and skill, you're pretty much a Centennial school in the Division III level. Your RITs, your Salisbury, right? Like, everyone has the debate of, can they beat Division I teams? For the record, I do not think they can beat Division I teams, but like, there's some really good teams out there that are at the Division III level, but sometimes you don't know until you research. Um, so Washington College for me, it was more so casting a larger blanket, and it was more so what we just talked about when I was recruiting those guys. I'm like, who hustles? Like, who loves to be out on the lacrosse field? Because when you get to that level, the reason that I'm paid full time and assist and head coaches are paid full time at the college level is to coach. We're not there to just manage. So getting our hands on guys that want to be there and love the game and are there for the right reasons is
Right.
huge at the Division III level. Education, now, don't get me wrong, across the board, you're a student athlete, right? I think this whole NIL thing is crushing the value of an education. Luckily, our sport, there's no $10 million lacrosse player out there. So I think choosing a school based on the academics, a good 4-year education, a place you can see yourself for 4 years, but also going to a program that they value you as a student athlete, and also, athletics is valued at the Division III level. So really, at the D3, I was reaching out to a lot, like probably 50 people a day, so 50 kids a day, with just the right mindset. They weren't the best athletes, they weren't the best size, they weren't the most skilled lacrosse players, but as long as they checked the box in a sense of attitude and there was something that we could create with them,
Right.
we were excited to get them to campus and show them around. So that's D3. I never coached Division II, but I've coached Division II players while I was down in North Carolina, and the mold's just a little bit different. And I can't speak too much on it, but there's a little bit of money involved. About half the scholarships of Division I. So it does get competitive in that sense, where you could potentially earn a full ride to a school. But for the most part, you're looking at more of athletically driven schools versus your academic side, or your revenue generating side. Like, some of those schools, especially in the world of lacrosse, you see Mercyhurst, Lemoyne, Lindenwood did this. Queens has done it. Pretty much going from Division II to Division I. So a lot of schools at the Division II level, they focus on their athletics because it allows them to potentially venture into the Division I world, not just for lacrosse, but for all their sports. So I haven't recruited there, but I've seen the athletes that go to Division II and they earn money, and I think it's a great avenue for the sport, because a lot of those conferences in Division II are trying to push for Division I for the right reasons, not so much just to say they are. So they get some pretty good athletes. Like, you look at Tampa, Lenore Ryan is doing a great job, and then your New York schools, the ones that are a lot of which are kind of elevating to the Division 1 because I think the NCAA is forcing them to because they're so successful. So I think D2 is a great avenue. I've just never coached at that level.
Right.
But it's coaching lacrosse. It's all the same sport. But Division 1, like when I got to High Point, similar as Division 3 when it comes to casting a larger net. Now that net got a lot smaller. So I went from reaching out to like 50 kids a day to probably 5 kids a day, which is a lot at the Division 1 level. But we're trying to go after guys that don't want to play, or not that they don't, but they weren't recruited by Big Ten. They weren't recruited by the ACC. They weren't recruited by the Ivy League. They weren't recruited by the Patriot League. So we're looking for guys that are falling through the cracks or guys that are from untraditional areas that, you know, might have the athleticism of a top tier Division 1 football player, but that guy doesn't want to go play at, Rice. He wants to potentially play at High Point for lacrosse, right? So it's a different type of athlete you're recruiting there, but it's Division 1 lacrosse. It's faster, it's more skilled. We played against Duke, we beat UNC. Like you can't just beat UNC with good athletes. You've got to find some guys that play lacrosse. You live in the transfer portal a little bit at those schools, not a ton. So sometimes you get lucky, and then on the other side, sometimes you fall short, right? So it's a net that's quote unquote big for the Division 1 world just because of the tier that the Atlantic 10 kind of falls in, right? And the school that High Point is. Now we had 73 guys on our roster,
Yeah.
which was a lot. Like when I walked on the field, I was like, holy crap, I have enough defensemen where it was bigger than my first year at Washington College, the entire team. So it's a lot more to manage, and it's the same thing with recruiting. Like we recruit until that next class shows up. So we were able to kind of recruit all the way until the end. Guys would, decide they didn't want to go to military schools, and now those guys are fresh chum in the water, as we say, and we would go after guys, or there's guys that maybe couldn't get in academically to a Patriot League school or even a NESCAC, right? Thinking the Division 3 route from an education standpoint, but we would go after those guys because they were talented lacrosse players. So, and then finally Division 1 Ivy League. Holy crow, man! Like you want to talk about like having the opportunity to recruit. I don't want to say anyone in the country because, to be honest, I wasn't one of these guys. Like I hated school. Like I'm just being honest, as a player. Like the reason I went to school was because my parents put me in a great position to go to a private school, and I didn't like it until my coaches were my teachers. So I really loved like once the bell rung, like going to practice every day. So that was kind of my mentality, and I wasn't an Ivy League kid. So I don't want to say I could recruit anybody in the country, but any parent that sees the success of their kid in the classroom and also on the cross field that sees an email or a call, it's mostly a phone call, right? Come across that says Brown University or Harvard or Dartmouth, like you're probably going to pick that phone call up, right? At least to explore it, right? So like, you're a dad. I am now. Like, I know I'm never going to tell my kid, don't bother with that. I'm going to be like, dude, you're going to take that call. Like,
Right.
we're going to see what they have to say. So, I've gone from pretty much like a large net to a normal fishing experience to we are going after megalodon for every single spot type situation. So, and what I mean by that is we have access to players that at High Point, we were waiting for them to see if they could get into schools, when now it's like you can either get in or you can't, right? And can you play to try and beat Cornell, who's going to be a top 5 team this year, a Harvard who's going to sniff the top 15, a Princeton who's probably going to sniff the top 5, a Yale who's won a national championship, is constantly kind of in the mix, and we're trying to dig out from being at the close to the bottom of the Ivy League, and it's like we need some guys that can play. And it's funny, like we recruited a couple guys that are on our team now who are freshmen, like when I first got at High Point, who didn't return our phone calls at High Point, and then we walk in the locker room now and we're like, hey, remember us? We remember you. we won't hold it against you, but like we're pumped to have the opportunity to get our hands on you as coaches. So um, that's the difference. And it's not meant to scare anybody. It's just the realistic side of it. And I'll probably dive into it a little bit later on what the Ivy League like recruiting looks like compared to everything else.
Yeah, tell me a little bit more, real quick. You referenced a bit ago about the role of the transfer portal and sort of what that did from a recruiting standpoint. How has the portal changed the recruitment landscape, and our colleges, universities leaving less room for those younger players, freshmen? And should players consider transferring as a potential path to their dream school?
I think the media and the NCAA are hurting our sport a little bit more than maybe some of the other sports, right? I'll touch on a couple of things. I think the transfer portal is great for the right reasons. I think it opens up opportunity for guys that maybe work really hard and just aren't seeing playing time, or they go to a school and a guy before they get there gets hurt and he medical red shirts and you're a goalie, and the next thing you know, like they're all conference goalie you were supposed to step in and recover gets another year. And it also opens the opportunity for guys that just maybe it just wasn't the right fit. Like mistakes happen, and that's okay. Uh, I think the media right now is showing how people quote unquote live in the transfer portal, right? It doesn't matter what sport. There's teams in college lacrosse like St. John's in the Big East. If you look at their roster, they've got 12 transfers. Jacksonville is, we call them transfer U. Division two, you look at Tampa, right? Like they've got a roster of like 80 guys, and I would say like 40 of them are transfers or fifth years. And sometimes that's how coaches like to work. They don't. I'm not going to say this because this is being recorded, but I will. Like some coaches want like kind of a quick fix if they need something in their offense or defense versus developing the next guy, or maybe it's just not there, right? Maybe something happened where it fell through in that position. So the transfer portal, I think, is a really good tool, but the media, I think, is boosting it up where it's allowing um, kids to kind of jump in, explore their options, and then if nothing works out, go back. And that's just not the case for lacrosse. Like I know personally, like I always put it in like business terms. If you're the CEO of a company, right? If you're the head coach of a program, and one of your employees comes to you and say, "Hey, thanks for hiring me. It's been a great year. I love this company. This is awesome. This is a great experience. I'm going to jump on LinkedIn and reach out to all of these recruiters and see if I have a better opportunity somewhere else based on what they're telling me." As that CEO, right, or as that head coach, to be like, in what world do you think that's okay? And that comes back to morals, right? That comes back to the interview process we put our recruits through, and even at the end of the year meetings, like we want to know that we really care about our guys for all the right reasons. So when we hear stuff like that, it's just like we don't want you back. Like we'll let you go. Like you can go in, but there's not really a home for you here. And the problem is the NCAA has allowed that to happen where you pretty much can't say you can't come back. There has to be a mutual agreement. Like if you're going in, it's out, but per the bylaws, like you can come back. And I think it has a lot to do with the NCAA wanting to be hands off with that situation. They just kind of want to put all the accountability on the coaching staffs and the athletic departments, right, for those schools. So I think it's a mixture of craziness, but for us, we use it as a tool,
Right.
More so on the number side of things, right? Like right now, we have a face-off guy graduating next year, and or two guys graduating next year, and our numbers are looking low there, right? So it's an example of us potentially looking. We're not going after, right? But if there's a face-off guy that pops up in there, we might sniff around a little bit. So we use it as a tool. We don't live in there, but I think it's done a lot of good, but it's also stirred up a lot of a lot of opinions about it. But we have no problem with it. I have no problem with it.
Right tool for the right job kind of thing, right?
Exactly. Right. It's all situation.
Right, right. Awesome, awesome. I want to talk to you a little bit, shift gears, and talk a little bit about showcases and exposure opportunities that exist. Showcases seem to be everywhere these days. I feel like we get emails about them constantly. As a coach, I get them all the time. I think programs that think I am a player, although those days are long gone. And I got to imagine the parents here also get emails about them constantly. How important are showcase events at this stage, and how should families decide and prioritize showcases from an attendance standpoint, from a player perspective?
Yeah, I'm sure every parent here is super overwhelmed. Some of you probably get emails from me saying, "Hey, come to our prospect day." Um, it's a way to make some money on this side of things, right? Whether you're a college coach, or your business, or a club, and but there's ways to differentiate between well run and well worth the investment showcase. And I'll talk about that first, and then I'll talk about like the exposure side of it. If you go to a camp and you learn two, three things, whether it's from one individual coach that's at that camp, um, or it's from multiple coaches that maybe you're going through different teams, or you go through different drills, kind of like a circuit type, however it's run, right? If you can learn two to three things that you can bring back and work on, not the the staple gun check, right? Not like a crazy situation where, to be honest, like you might not be athletic enough to do it yet, right? Or you don't know how to apply it to the game because all somebody did was show you it on the sideline without any context. Like, I mean, like taking two or three drills home and being like, wow, like I can actually apply this to the game and I can see it happening. So if you go to camps where you see that, right? And I would lean heavily on Sean or Scott, right? Or Coach Corey, like guys that see or know people in the game. Like Sean shoots me text, Scott shoots me text all the time, saying like, "Hey, what do you think about this event? What do you think about this showcase?" And you can probably tell, I am not even a screen door. I am like a broken glass window. Like anything kind of goes through, and I don't really care, because I run events, right? I run prospect camps. I work, the Eastern Showcase, which is a great like D3 level event. But my biggest thing is the values behind what you get from those off of the exposure, right? There might be situations where you might sign up for a camp where it says every single college coach in the country is going to be there, D1, 2, and 3, right? Like, and that might be the case, but if it is pouring rain and it is raining sideways, thunder and lightning, like no one's going to have their notebook out. No one's going to have their iPad out. But if you can gain four or five drills or three like mental, notes or things you can bring back to maybe your high school club coach and say, "Hey, coach, I learned this from, the head coach at Delaware when I was at this event. Like, can we do this drill?" Right. And then you bring something back. I think it's well worth the money. Now, finding out which ones of those are and aren't good, that's where you have to kind of lean on guys that know people in the game, or make a phone call, right? Like a lot of these companies and websites, they put at the bottom, like, contact us, and you can ask them like, "Hey, what does the itinerary look like? What kind of coaches are going to be there?" Most of the time it's publicized. Um, but just ask, like, what kind of drills are we going to be running? Is it going to be 30-1, right? Is there going to be 30 defensemen for one D coach, or is it going to be 30 defensemen but with 13 coaches, 13 defensive coaches? Because then it's a good ratio. So I would say there's nothing wrong with showcases. There's nothing wrong with prospect days. I always think the showcases that are the day before the tournament you're going to go to that weekend are always beneficial, because you could be in front of a coach that really likes you, at that showcase event. You're on his team. You're in his drills, whatever it might be. 99.9% of the time, that coach is going to be there the whole weekend. If he writes you down on that Friday, he's going to go, like, you might be from North Carolina or Alaska or wherever, like they're gonna make an effort to at least watch a half of you play
Right.
those next 2 days. So I think they're great, like across the board. As long as you're going to ones, you're getting something out of them. Now the
Right.
exposure side, it's a different story, right? Like I'll be honest, in the fall, I'm not flying down to North Carolina to go to any showcases because at that point in time for me recruiting the Ivy League, we maybe are recruiting 4 or 5 positions left.
Right.
And we have our eyes on maybe 12 guys for those 4 or 5 spots. And
Right.
unless there's one that's in North Carolina that's going somewhere there who's probably in the top 5 of those spots, that's probably the only reason I'm going down there. At that time in the fall, I'm probably going to a bigger event that's closer to home because a lot of them are one day. A lot of them are like higher volume where I can watch maybe 2 of those or maybe 6 of those 12 guys in that class. And then I can start working towards the next class by just going to the next fields. So um, I think the exposure really varies, right? I think if you go to events that promote recruitment, this is going to sound crazy, guys. Just listen to me here. They promote recruitment, and that's all they do: recruit, recruit, recruit. We have recruits, all this stuff. It's like they are desperate to get college coaches. I think events that promote competition, high level lacrosse, high level like opportunities to
Right.
play against teams you've never played. I think those are the events that you want to go to because that's what we care about. We don't want to go see a team beat the bag off of somebody by 25 goals. I'll be there for 2 minutes. I'm like, all right, that team can score and they can do everything well, but like, can they go up against a team that can play? So exposure wise, I think the more competitive event, the higher
Right.
exposure you're going to have at the higher level. That doesn't mean the lower marketed competitive events. That doesn't mean there's not going to be college coaches there. There's always going to be college coaches because our budgets also dictate where we can and can't go. Now, I'm fortunate enough. I'm at a school, and even at High Point, I could go anywhere in the country, and because it's an investment to get the right guy on the team. But I think some schools they can't really leave their states, or maybe a 3-state radius just based off their budget.
Right. So if I'm hearing you right, sounds like showcases offer an opportunity for development, and prospect days maybe contributing a little bit more towards an exposure perspective, or do you kind of weight them the same from an exposure standpoint?
Yeah, you can put them. I'll put them into 2 different categories. I think showcases, it depends, right? Some showcases, you show up, you play 3 games. The next day, you play 3 games with guys you've never played with, guys you've never played for. You don't know the communication. So I think those ones are tough. Like that's tough to just show up and play with people you've never communicated with. Um, but there are showcases that you spend the first hour, right, getting coached by college coaches or even just coaches that are big in the game, and you're going to get something out of it. So I think doing your homework there and understanding the structure, kind of how I mentioned, but prospect days, um, I think you've got to have a target in mind, right? You have to know a little bit about yourself. More importantly, leaning on your coaches, thinking like, "Hey, I'm going to go to the Duke prospect camp. What do you think?" And it's like, if you're 2026, you're probably not going to get recruited to Duke. They're done, right? Like they've got their guys. They're finished. It's not impossible, right? But if you're 2027, 2028, younger, it's not going to hurt because you're going to learn something because prospect days at colleges, it's run like a practice for, I would say 60% of it, right? So you're going to see how that coaching staff coaches, you're going to see the drills they run, you're going to see the intensity it needs to be. And then you're also going to have a chance to compete, whether it's in live drills or games for that last like 40%. So I think the younger that you are, if you've got a school or type of school in mind, prospect days are always great. I think the older you are, choosing schools that might have reached out to you that you're interested in, like enjoyed having conversation with, the coaching staff, maybe you were on campus and they want to see you play one more time. Like there's nothing better than just getting back on campus, playing right in front of their entire staff, and truly you'll get an answer after that, right? So if you're in the, it's like dating, right? If you're in the talking stage with a coaching staff as an older player, there's no better answer than going to their next prospect day. And if they reach out to you quickly afterwards, they want to go on that second date. They want to continue that conversation. They want to pursue you. If they're a good staff, they're going to tell you cut and dry, like, "Hey, we're not interested." Or if you don't hear from them, it's probably best to move on, not take them off the list, because people make mistakes, right? They could always come back if you were interested, but move on to maybe people that seem a little bit more interested and want to pursue you.
And that's obviously within the appropriate windows from an engagement standpoint, right? I mean, it's depending on where a player is from an age standpoint, when a coach can reach out versus not.
Yeah, absolutely. Like we have a prospect day this weekend, and most of it is 2027s. The 26s, we can talk to those guys right then and there, but the 27s, we tell them right at the end of camp, like, "Look, listen, you can email me, call me, you can text me, you can do whatever you want. I just can't talk to you until September 1st. So that doesn't mean I'm not going to do my homework, right? Because if I don't, then I'm not a good coach, right? But I'm not going to, no offense, I'm not going to break the rules and lose my job over a kid that might not choose me, right? So it's and then even the younger and younger you get, like, if I've had 29s reach out to me and I'm like, holy crow, I don't delete the email, but I don't even open it. Right. Like, I'm like, I've got some other stuff on my mind. I've got to stop Princeton and Yale and Cornell's offense, who have top 5 attackmen this year. Like, I'm more worried about that than talking to an 8th grader.
Right. So it sounds like, I mean, we got a lot of folks from our 2028 team here on the line. It sounds like prospect days, good opportunity to get some of that exposure, opportunity to see how the game is played at that particular level from a coaching staff, whether that's at a High Point or a Duke or a Brown. Understand how that game is played, the speed in which that game is played, and to get some exposure with the understanding that coaches aren't necessarily able to engage with you post a prospect camp itself.
100%. I think you hit the nail on the head for your 28s, your 29s, even some maybe newer to the game 27s. Getting on a college campus, I think, is huge. Like seeing the flow of things. Going to a Division I or whatever, Division II, III facility and kind of see what it looks like and get the feel, and then really seeing how the game is played at that division is huge. And most of that you will recognize based off the coaching staff, right? Like what the intensity looks like. But yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head in a sense of the younger you are, the more so it's about understanding what you're striving for as a young student athlete. And then for the older crew, it's more so narrowing down opportunities, right? And reading the writing on the wall or opening maybe some late opportunities, right? So,
so from a recruiting standpoint, as you're evaluating players, whether it's at a tournament, summer tournament, fall tournament, what are you looking for? Are you doing the evaluations? Are you evaluating players at a showcase or a prospect day any different than you would be at a summer tournament or fall tournament?
No, I could care less. Like that's just me personally. Like if you show up and you ball, like I'm gonna write some notes down. Now, if I've never heard of you, I've never heard of your club, I don't know, you live in Wisconsin or Wyoming, like I'm probably not gonna just like call you up. I'm gonna do my homework and diligence, but I could care less. Like I take notes all the time. I walk by fields. I stop at fields if it looks like it's good competition and guys are banging pads or snapping the ball and scoring goals and celebrating and like that's what I look for. Like I look for guys that I would want to be a part of my
Right.
team when it comes to energy, effort, enthusiasm, passion. Like,
Yeah.
and then you take a peek at the skill, right? You take a look
Right.
at all right, can they catch and throw both hands? Like, where are they going to be limited? Do I have enough time over the course of 4 years,
Right.
maybe five with the whole NCAA thing going on right now? Like, do I have enough time to turn this guy into somebody that he wants to be, let alone like will help our team?
Right.
Um, but yeah, personally, now I'm crazy. You guys can probably already tell by all of this. Like, I love recruiting. Like,
Right.
there's coaches out there that hate recruiting. They don't like getting on the road. They don't like talking to people. I'm like, you are not a coach if you hate the whole purpose of building your team, and that's recruiting. So there are some coaches out there that they have a script when they go to fields, and they're like, I'm going to hit this game at this half, this game at this hour, this game at that, and I'm like, dude, if it's hot over here, I'm going over there. If it's cold over there, I might still go over there because there might be one guy we're missing out. Like, I'm big, and this is why I love Coach Torp. Like, we're the same in the same sense. It's like if everybody's at that field, we're probably going to go to the other field because someone over there might give us more than what's going on over there. Like, everybody's watching over there. Can we go find a guy over there that's going to beat every single guy on that field, right? So that's kind of how I do things. And I don't even look at the classes sometimes. Like, I will if like I'm like, holy crow, this guy's massive. Like,
Right.
like he looks like he's a reclass or whatever, right? So it's like sometimes I'll look at it, but sometimes I'll like keep my book shut for a couple games, and I just write guys down on my phone or write them on the back of the book, and I'll look back later, or I'll watch a second game and then I'll open the book and be like, all right, where's this kid from? Um,
Right.
do a little bit of homework before I watch him again.
I remember sitting at the next to you at the tournament in right outside of DC. I forget what it was, in the Indianapolis area, and we sat and watched the full game. And I don't think we talked about individual skill set the entire time. We talked about how guys were hustling between the 30s. We were talking about whether or not that player was going to be able to shut down, this other guy who'd been dominating the game, and the mentality of play, the grit, the hustle of guys. I think we talked a good 20 minutes about players who snap the ball, and that's it, right? And what does that show you from a guy that snaps the ball versus the guy that's putting the ball in the back of the net half a dozen times or so?
I think there's a pace of play that comes
Right.
that comes into it, and I'll touch on the first point you made. Like, I remember exactly the moment we were sitting on that sideline, and like it fires me up because there's this defender out there that is an absolute bully in the
Right.
best way possible, and no one knows who he is. No one knows he's from middle of nowhere, Florida. Like, I absolutely love this kid because he points to the guy who, if you're to look across the field, you're like, holy crap, that guy's a difference maker. And this kid from Florida just said, like, that's who I'm going after.
Right.
Right. And like, those are the type of guys that I go after. But there's other coaches that are like, I'm going to go after the other kid that looks the part because then I don't have to teach his skill.
Right.
Don't get me wrong. Like, that kid, he's very good. The other kid, like, there's nothing against it, but I think there's just different mentalities there. So that's kind of my point on the first one. Where and then it's the speed of the game, right? Guys that can snap the ball that don't even think about catching and throwing. They just throw big boy passes, which we like
Right.
to say. There's no like everything's right here or everything's right here, right? And or it doesn't matter. It's here or here, and they're catching it, they're moving it, their eyes are up. They look the ball in, right? But it looks like they don't, right? You watch guys in the NBA like Stockton and Nash and Allen Iverson, like these point guards that it looks like even Steph Curry now, like, sorry, I was dating myself there a little bit, but like looking at some of these point guards in the NBA, they don't even look at the ball when they dribble or when they catch it. It's just such a good feel. That's kind of one of the trigger words I wanted to share is like there's a, there's a part of recruiting where you just have to see the feel, right? Like, do guys know how to snap the ball? Do they make the home run pass every single time they try and dodge, or do they just make the simple A to B passes that
Right.
that get more out of the offense? Or defensively, like, they just keep their stick disruptive. They don't move it too much. They just keep it right there. And when they need to make contact, they do.
Right.
Um, So that's like the feel side of it. And then there's
Yeah.
the speed, which is like, and I always say like snapping the ball. Like they're snapping that thing up and down the field or across the top of the box or through X or, they're running 2-man game. Like there's not a lot of high school or middle school players that can run 2-man game.
Yeah.
There's just not. But if I see a kid that can do it, I'm like, that's a great feel. So,
Right.
and
Right.
and to be honest, that just comes with loving the game. Like you and I both, and Scott, you had the chance too. Like, and everybody on this call, I want you guys to go and look at senior out at Utah. I think he's going to be an All-American this year. Ryan Steins. Like, I remember walking on the field with Sean the first day I
Yeah.
coached, and there's some big kids. They were like juniors in high school. I'm like, all right, cool. I got the the quote unquote best team, the A team. I'm working with Sean, a guy that played great college lacrosse. Scott said these guys are pretty good, and a lot of like all state players are on the team. And I'm looking at like the smallest guy on the team. I'm like, who is that kid? Like, who's that kid? And Sean's like, oh, it's Steins. He's been on the team forever. He's like 2 years younger than everybody. I'm like,
Right.
he's the best kid out here. And
Right.
I remember a couple of the other coaches, it was like a clinic, like saying like, yeah, but he's small. I'm like, I don't care. That kid is better than everyone out here, and he doesn't. He looks in the mirror and sees 6'4".
Right.
Like he doesn't see 5'5" Ryan Steins, who's 2 years younger than everybody on the field. Like, and it had nothing to do with that mentality. It was just he had the field, and he loved playing. He loved catching the ball lefty, snapping the ball lefty, playing righty, snapping it righty, turning the corner, getting knocked down, pop right back up, and celebrating when that ball in the net. So like there's a feel aspect to it, and that comes with love of the game, studying the game, and that kid,
Yeah.
if you asked his mom, she'd be pissed because he never did his homework, or she always had to sit with him and do his homework. And his mom's awesome, and so's his dad, and I love that family. But like he studied so much lacrosse
Right.
that it was like, all right, dude, like you got to focus on
Right.
schoolwork. So that's how you kind of build that feel.
Yeah. He loved the grind. I remember uh, when I still grind. The amount of time and commitment he would put into it from a study standpoint, not only a skill perspective, but an IQ standpoint. And even to this day, I mean, the kid loves the grind, loves the grind of staying in shape, which is really fantastic. Coach, I want to switch gears just a little bit and talk a bit about timing and with the recruitment process and sort of where that unfolds and get a better understanding of when college programs really start looking at players. Is that the early ninth grade? And early player development? Are you looking at players in areas you would in others? Tell me about that. That would look like.
Yeah. So you're kind of breaking up there a little bit. I don't know if it was just my end, but I think your question was just the timeline, right, of when college coaches are looking at different classes and whatnot. And it's just like how I answered the D1 top of Division 1 all the way down to D3. Like Division 3, I was looking until the 11th hour. Like I was looking at guys in 3 different classes um, during the summer because I'll just use the I'll use the 2023 class as an example. That was kind of my first, and I didn't recruit any of these guys, but I was recruiting 2023s to Washington College in the middle of the summer, and these kids either were going to college somewhere or didn't select a school yet, and they were supposed to be freshmen that coming fall. So I'm recruiting that class, and then I'm recruiting the next class to stay competitive in the Centennial Conference and make sure that we're building a solid first full class. And then I'm also keeping an eye on the next class just to know. And most of this is through communication with coaches saying like, hey, I'm recruiting these 5 guys on your team. Who's next in line? Like who's just like um, who's just like this Chase Smith guy that I just got from you. right? Because you coach that kid forever. Like, who's the next guy, right? So I don't want to say we used to go back to the watering hole because we do, because it's just a trust thing. But that's D3. Now, Division 1 High Point, I would say it's the same thing. You're just looking for a little bit more specifics, right? And that's more so like we need a goalie or we need another midfielder or we need something like that. So later in the game, you're looking for something more specific, and you're moving on to the next class outside of that position you need. And then with Brown, like Ivy League, I'm already on to the 27s, and I'm fielding calls about 28s. Like we have a list of all the guys we're going to be watching this summer in the 27 class, because summer is really important, because right after summer there's a dead period in August. Our guys get back to school, and then September 1st opens up. So we go from on the road to 2, maybe 3 weeks with our family, kind of disconnecting if we can. But that entire time, we're thinking about the hundreds, thousands of players we watched all summer to come down to a small amount of spots that we probably need to get guys on campus on September 1st to stay competitive. By now, we're different as a staff. We still have spots in our 26 class. We don't tell anybody what positions. Now you can go on Inside Lacrosse and see where guys are going. Like, it's just the internet. That's the world we live in. But we don't say what we're looking. We don't limit ourselves, because if there's somebody out there that we think is going to help us win an Ivy League championship and go to the tournament and make a run, like we're never going to be like, nah, nope, we're good, we're full, we don't need that. Like, it's just not how we recruit at Brown. But sometimes there's schools where it's just like their spots are full. Like, that's just all they're able to do. So they're moving on to the next class. They're excited about who they selected in that class and who committed to them, and they're loyal. And so there's no shopping around or anything like that. So if you're a 26, you still got time. If you're a 27, you definitely got time. If you're a 28, you have a ton of time.
You're about 10th graders that are committing these days. What does that really mean? Is that agreement? Is this scholarship, or are kids just committing to an admissions process? What does that really mean?
Yeah, your Ivy Leagues, it's different for every school, right? So your Ivy Leagues, we don't have athletic scholarships, so you're committing to the admissions process of our school. So, and we support those student athletes in the admissions process, right? Like, we help them for early decision. We get all their information in front of admissions early, and we pretty much we help write a narrative to our admissions department, say, hey, this person wants to be a Brown Bear, right? Like, this is someone who's going to help us win a championship. Like, there's a narrative that goes into it, because there's no money involved and there's no guarantee in the Ivy League that a student's going to get in. It's that competitive, right? So, but the earlier someone commits to that process with us, the better the narrative is when it comes to their grades. Like, if they have fantastic grades, if their grades are okay but they're good, they have an opportunity maybe to take the SAT, ACT again, and get their scores up, and or maybe take a summer course or advance, instead of taking just a regular course, like jumping into an AP course to kind of boost their GPA or just their resume. So the earlier the better on the Ivy League side of things. And then you have your Division 3 conferences like the NESCAC and even the Centennial Conference that are high academic schools. They kind of wait and see who those high academic guys are that don't commit to the Ivies, and they go after them hard, because it's the same process there, even though it's Division 3. They need some time to make sure that kid can get through the application process and get in. Schools that aren't as high academic and have scholarship money, your ACCs, Big Tens, your national champion caliber teams, they're shelling out money September 1st. They are like, I was doing it myself. I just didn't have, I walked into people's houses without a wallet, is essentially is, people are sitting on people's couches September 1st and having conversations, and it's a negotiation, right? There's talks of money in terms of just scholarship dollars, right? What it's going to cost, and that's all laid out for the families and how it works. And then there's in today's world, there's also a conversation of NIL. Like it's a thing. It's not big in the Ivy League. We don't really deal with it too much, just because of the investment of the education you're going to get. Like all of our guys are, just an example like this, the founder of Warby Parker, the the president of Sony Pictures. These guys are Brown lacrosse alumni, right? So um, there's some great opportunities from an Ivy League degree. Now, those other schools that we compete with, there's money on the table September 1st, whether it's scholarship dollars, NIL. We've lost guys to those situations, and then there's also shifting to Division 2. I don't think there's as many conversations money that early. I think a lot of those schools take their time just because they only have half the amount of scholarships that Division 1 has. So there's less money. So they need to be more strategic about how they invest their money. Because I think if they go all in, and I speak from experience talking with a Division 2 head coach about this, is um, if they go all in with their money, then they're kind of handcuffed a little bit. If something else happens, or they find someone else, or someone falls through the cracks in Division 1, or a guy goes in the transfer portal, that if they want an opportunity to pull somebody, they're going to want to have some money in their wallet. And then Division 3, there's no athletic scholarship, so it's all merit based. So your grades, right, they pay off at the Division 3 level. Every school is different. I remember at Washington College, we used to be able to stack merit and financial aid, and if there was any other scholarships that you can apply for, you could stack all those on top of each other. So your bill goes from $60,000, you get half off in merit. Your financial aid package comes back, cuts that in half. Next thing you know, you're at 15, and you can apply for maybe three scholarships on campus that are $3,000 each. Next thing you know, you're down to $9,000 a year out of pocket, and you get yourself a summer job and pay that off. And all you have to do is just pay those student loans after you graduate and you have a job with a good education. So there's a lot of strategy that goes into the money side of things in terms of recruiting, but you see the guys that are committing September 1st, there's probably a lot of money involved where a decision needs to be made. Like, because if you blink on September 1st, spots are gone because we're moving on to the next guy that wants to be a part of our program. And the same thing goes for the money side, right? If you're gonna try and shop around when you have a deal, right? It's like that deal's not always going to be there.
Yeah. Want to pivot to social media and players' online presence. Do you and other coaches look at players' social media accounts? What kind of impression can that make, good or bad? Sort of, what is the role of social media in your perspective?
It's changed a lot. We actually use it as a tool. Like I don't, because it's crazy. I'm like old now, but we have some younger guys on staff that they follow our recruits. You're allowed to click. You can't type from a recruiting standpoint. So you can follow. You can click that follow button. You can like posts. You can favorite. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what the terms are anymore. But you can only click. You can't comment or anything. You can't like share certain things. So those guys are pretty good at it, and they draw attention, right? Like if we're recruiting a kid and we follow him, or our staff follows him on Instagram or TikTok or whatever is used now, it's like it usually draws some interest. Like guys are more receptive on social media, we're starting to find, than they are actually like answering their texts or phones. Like nobody answers the phone anymore. We went from a society where people would just pop in because they were in the neighborhood, and like people would knock on your door and you'd answer no problem, to nobody answers the door anymore. Nobody's ever in the neighborhood. And now we have these cell phones where you used to pick up every call because you were pumped you could get a mobile call, and now nobody even answers the phone, right? So it's like, oh, I didn't have that number saved, I'm not picking up. I'm like, dude, you just missed out on a college opportunity. But Social media, we use it as a tool, not a ton, to be honest. Like we just kind of keep tabs. But when it comes to the responsibility and accountability on there, we always say just post as if your grandmother or your grandfather is kind of looking over your shoulder. Um, so being responsible is huge on there. If we see stuff that's inappropriate, and everybody has these accounts that are called like burners and stuff, it's like we find that stuff. We find it out really quick, and people stay on top of us with it too. Like it's a tight world. If somebody sees something, like they'll share it with us. They'll say, "Hey, listen, like, uh, just because of the trust we have with people in the industry, it's like I hope that people would send us stuff if it's questionable." Um, but I think it's like I'll be honest, when I think the things that were bad when I was in college on social media aren't considered bad anymore, right?
Right.
Like I remember going through the college coaching process, and I hope Coach Tambroni doesn't watch this because I'm just going to tell a quick story when I was at Penn State. But like one of our team rules was uh, you can't you can't wear like a T-shirt, a jersey, a sweatshirt, or anything from a different university that has lacrosse. And I remember going to the locker room after a practice, and we knew the staff was upset about something. We were like, "Oh God, like what's this going to be?" And they brought in a stack of papers and they handed out, and this is a true story, guys. Like they handed out a stack of papers to all of us because they couldn't just show it on the TV. Um, and on each piece of paper was a tweet that somebody said that was quote unquote inappropriate, right? Or the grammar was incorrect, or just something that just didn't look good. And there was a picture of one of the guys on the team, and he wasn't doing anything bad. It was just he was posing in a picture. It was clearly a college setting, but he had a North Carolina Michael Jordan jersey on, and we got in trouble for that. Like coaches nowadays, like it's an MJ jersey. Like in my opinion, I'm like, all right, it's a Michael Jordan jersey. Like I'm never gonna knock. I'm not gonna knock a kid for looking up to probably one of the greatest athletes of all time. Um, do I wish he wasn't rocking North Carolina? Yeah, absolutely. But he could have had that jersey from when he was 12, right? Like, so I think perspective is a big thing too on social media. It's like look, kids are different nowadays, so we're learning every day like what's considered good and bad. There's obvious what's good and there's obvious what's bad, but just little things like that where we're not going to drop a kid or do anything
Right.
crazy just because he's wearing a Harvard lacrosse shirt that he might have got that when he went to a prospect camp and he's just posing with his cousins in a beach photo. Like we're not going to get mad. Now we might crack some jokes, be like, "Yo, dude, you need to throw that thing in the ocean," but like we're not going to be too upset. We'll just kind of shrug it off a little bit.
Yeah, it sounds like making the right impression. Be mindful of what you're doing, what you're sharing, how you're interacting is an important component. I want to pivot slightly to the role of highlight films. We see it all the time. We see it on social. We see guys with YouTube followings and whatnot. Tell me a little bit about the role of highlight films, highlight reels, and any tips for creating highlight reels for players that allow them to stand out.
Yeah, actually, when you sent me this question over, I actually made bullet points because this is like I think it's an ongoing trend and ongoing. It's like the face-off rules. It's like this is ever changing on what people are looking for. So just a couple tips. Don't fast forward yourself running. Like we'll figure out how fast and slow you are. Um, that's like a trend now. I never thought it had to be, but be be yourself on film. Make the clips a little bit longer than you'd think. Like I know everybody says like, oh, it needs to be within 4 minutes, or it needs to be 2 minutes, or it needs to be, within this time frame. Make it a little bit longer. Like we want to see how the ball ended up on the ground for your ground ball to a clear, right? We want to see maybe even like close to a full possession if you're a goalie and you saw three shots in that possession and you saved all three. Like, don't just put the highlight reel save from that possession on there. Like, show us that you dropped down to your butt, made a good save, you gave up a rebound, but you popped right back up and you're ready. And then they move the ball around and you they take a shot and you get a piece and it goes off the end line, right? So you're playing goalie as a 3 shot clock reset possession. It's a long clip, but it shows like you've got resilience, right? You've got skill to pop back up and not just like hope the other team picks it up and jams it on you, right? And then you make that third save, you've got the ball and you clear it out. Like that's poise right there. So those are just some of the tips in terms of the actual film itself. Like let those things run. We want to see the full possession. We like to watch full games. Like if it's someone that calls us and it's somebody we don't have on one of our lists or we haven't seen play, usually we're going to ask like, all right, we can't go see them at this point. We're going to need a full game, right? Whether you're a midi attackman, whatever. We want to see how you stand off ball, how you position yourself, how you move. We want to see if you ride. We want to see how your presence in a clear. We want to see just your body language on coming on and off the field as maybe a midfielder after something good or bad happens, right? Like, so we want to see all of that as if we were able to go and watch you play that day or at that next event, because sometimes we just can't. So having full game film on hand is always good. Talking about platforms like YouTube. YouTube's great, obviously, just because it's easy, and when you Google someone's name, the lacrosse video or something, it's going to pop right up. So I think YouTube's good having it on there. It's just simple, right? It's easy to share stuff on there. I think the IMLCA website is fantastic for student athletes that are looking to get recruited. And the reason being is it's like your LinkedIn page for your athletic abilities. And you can put everything on there, right? Like you can put, I wouldn't do this, but you can put what hand you are on there. You can put like where you like to play on the field. Again, those are things I wouldn't want to tell coaches, because me personally, coach, whatever you need. I want to play for you, right? I want to play with these guys. Like whatever you need, right? That's kind of the mindset we look for. But if you're a lefty, it's good to put on there, because almost every team is going to look for a lefty, right? If you don't put anything on there, we're going to assume you're a righty. Just it's how the world works, right? So, but there's other stuff you can put on there too. You can put like a little bio about like, if you're a boy, like a Eagle Scout or whatever, like what you do in terms of extracurriculars. The film, obviously, you can put a photo, you can put your weight, you can put your height, you can do like your combine stats, which is pretty good. And I think one of the most important things that we pull from it is you can upload your transcripts, like your unofficial, most recent. You can put test scores on there. You can put your GPA, right? So if all that stuff is on there, like for our 27s and 28s right now, like we can have all that before we reach out to your coach and say like, hey, is this GPA legit, or is he just putting a 4.5 up there?
Right.
I never knew you could get a 4.5 until this new generation. It's probably because I never could get one, but like having all of that info that we can plug into our list shortens our conversations with your coaches. It shortens our conversations after you maybe decide to come play for us with admissions. Right. When it comes to building that narrative, saying like, all right, I already know that Sean Gracie does all these things as extracurriculars. I just confirmed them with him while I interviewed him when I had him on campus, right? With his family. I got to know his family a little bit more, so I added a couple of notes. I also know this is GPA and this is the most updated transcript. Boom. I just sent everything to admissions as that first step for early enrollment for Sean Gracie. That's like the headache that is taken away from us that off the field is great, because now we don't have to ask 9 questions about admissions when, no offense, we're getting paid to coach lacrosse. We're not getting paid to be in the admissions department or go back to you 9 times with questions when we can pull all that stuff from that site. So I think that's a great tool. And I think that here's one thing though, I will say, the messaging through IMLCA, this drives me crazy. The emails that say, hey coach, I saw that you looked at my profile on IMLCA. It's like, right. It's like, I'm just being honest. I probably accidentally, after the first video I watched, it just went to yours because that's how it works on that site. I think there's some things they need to tweak on there where it's like, hey, stop ratting us out like LinkedIn does for looking at kids' profiles. Like,
Right.
yeah, that's great. It entices kids to come back more and more and more. It's like a drug, but like at the end of the day, you can email us a million times. It's like sometimes it's just not true. Or the big one, and I can't stress this enough, don't email us through that platform because we work for schools that have unbelievably strict servers that control our emails. And
Right.
um, a lot of the time, those messages through that website get put into a different folder. So we actually don't see that stuff. So if you really want to email us, like go to our website, pull out our emails, write out
Right.
what you want to do. Um, and again, like emails aren't bad. Like we always, here's how I use the emails you guys send. If I go out and recruit, I put all my notes in and then I search in my email the names that I recruited because I want to see like, hey, is this kid interested in us? Right. I don't read every single email. I don't.
Right.
Like it's just the name of the beast. I'm going to go with my gut feeling over trying to find somebody via email right now.
Right.
Back when I was at Washington College, different conversation. Every time I got an email, I answered that guy because I knew, okay, this person took the time to go to the website, check out, do a little research, and then email us and take the time to do it. So there's got to be some interest in Washington College. Like
Right.
not
Right.
for nothing, every kid with good grades in the country wants to go to an Ivy League school. So it's just a little bit different
Right.
shifting process.
So IMLCA, great way to showcase your profile, not only from a film standpoint, to learn a little bit more about yourself as an individual, both personally, academically, and athletically. Sounds like maybe not the best spot to communicate, but maybe some engagement via that site. But reaching out, having that conversation, maybe linking to the profile itself might be a good pathway for there.
Yeah, 100%. There's so many platforms out there now that are trying to do this, and that's just the best one. It's been the most consistent. It's run by our coaches association, so it's just it's the easiest
Right.
for us to navigate right now.
Great. All right. One last question before we wrap up, and I want to open it up to some folks on the line to see if they have any questions. So if you're out there, be prepared to ask some questions to Coach. What are one or two things you wish you saw more of from recruits?
Oh, it's a good question. So I kind of touched on my mindset for like the on-field stuff. I think Ryan Steins is a great. Going back to him again, guys, watch him. He's at Utah. He's from your area. Um, he's a great example of loving the game and diving into the game. And it's so easy with social media right now to just watch like the highlights, be like, oh, I'm going to try that wraparound one hand shot. It's like, no offense, like I've seen some guys that can't even hold the stick up with one hand for more than like 2 seconds, right? So um, dive into watching players like Rob Pennell. Dive into watching players like Ryan Steins, right? Dive into players, not just PLL guys, but current college guys. Like I've got to go up against these two guys this year, and I can't stop watching their film because I can't figure them out. It's like Cursed with Cornell and Lyons at Yale. I'm like, I cannot figure these guys out. And the reason being is because they have such great feel and they have so many tools in the shed because of their love of the game. And they probably watched so many guys growing up, right? And went out and tried, right? They did their work for an hour and then they said, you know what? I saw Chris Lyons do this move. I don't know if he meant to do it, but I'm going to try it and I'm going to give it 30 reps, right? So like I would love to see guys experiment for the right reasons, not to get put on the tournament highlight reel, right? I want to see guys experiment and nail something, or at least try it and get up and ride the ball back, right? Or not throw that check the next time down in that spot, but maybe try it in a different spot on the field later because you've been working hard. Like take some gambles, be bold. Like that's what I want to see on the field. But being bold isn't being dumb. right? Being bold is like, I put the time and effort into this thing. I want to see if it's worth adding to my arsenal, right? Like if it's worth adding
Right.
to the shed, right? So um I would say on the field, that's kind of the big one. Any players that are on here, please listen up. How you guys treat your parents or your guardians while you're on a visit is a huge part of recruiting. If you're sitting in a meeting with a head coach of a program or a coordinator and you're dozing off, right? Or you're not paying attention, or you're doing all this stuff, you're fidgeting and all those things. It's like that's your future right there. If you're not interested, at least be respectful, right? And then once you leave, just email that coach and say, "Hey, coach, I'm going to go in a different direction." We would prefer that versus the kid who's fallen asleep or not engaged, because if we see that, then we're not going to be engaged and we're not going to be interested because we're just thinking like that kid's out. And then we'll get emails from those kids saying like, "Hey, what's the next steps? What's the next step?" It's like, you know what? We're actually going to email you and say, "Hey, we're moving on." So that's just being engaged in general. So like that's just a word from the wise, like be engaged even if you're not interested, right? Just it's a respect thing at that point because you never know where coaches are going to end up. And I have a story about that. Like when I was at Washington College, I recruited this kid extremely hard, and I liked the parents. The parents I think liked me because they answered my calls and they would ask me questions. And I really liked the family. I liked the kid, but he was a very good player. He was being communicated by some Division I programs, but we were closer to home. We had a bit of a better history. We checked more boxes for what this kid wanted. The only box we didn't check was we were Division III versus Division I, and so I'm recruiting this kid extremely hard, and eventually he just stops talking to me, and there's nothing there. So I reach out to his high school coach, and he's like, "I don't know, I'll ask." And I wouldn't hear anything from the high school coach, and I see the kid and I say, "Hey, what's going on? Like, how's the recruiting process going?" Just being a human being. I developed a relationship with this kid. And then he's like, there was no maturity level there. And it's hard for a kid who's 15, 16 years old. But sometimes us seeing those hard conversations or a kid telling us no for the right reasons is like sometimes you want the kid a little, again, it's dating, right? The girl that tells you no 15 times, you always want her 15 times more, right? Um, so there's a situation where this kid kind of blows me off and I get the High Point defensive coordinator job. And next thing you know, the kid's bringing me off the hook. I'm like, I'm good. Like you always have to be respectful because you don't know where some of those coaches are going to end up. Right. And sometimes it's for the better. Sometimes it's always going to work out if you're honest, you're respectful, and you communicate the proper channels. And sometimes those conversations are hard. Sometimes those conversations are in person, and being a 14-year-old kid going up to a college coach is sometimes hard, but we always love the respect. Even if you just come up and introduce yourself, 99% of the time you're going to catch us off guard because we're watching a million games or we're just finished coaching or we got other things in our mind. But we always kind of remember the interaction at the end of the day. And there's always kind of that like, hey, maybe let me check in on like what my last communication was with him. Or I'll check out his highlight tape and maybe give him another look tomorrow at the event. So being respectful and being engaged on a personal level is huge. And then I said earlier, like couldn't stress this enough, like how you guys respect whoever brings you to that visit, right? Whether it's your grandparents, a friend, family friend, a teacher, coach, parents, like I can't stress this enough. It is an automatic, you're out. Like you're not going to be a brown bear. You are not going to be anything in my program if you roll your eyes when your mom asks a question, right? Or if you huff and puff because dad asks another question and you just want to get back in the car, or your parents are asking the questions that matter more than anything because you don't understand, and you're saying like, "Oh, dad, come on, like I just want to go here." It's like that's great, you want to go here, but sometimes like your parents, guardians, whatever the situation is at home, like they have your best interests
Right.
in favor of you. Like I can't stress enough. We obviously want you. There's a reason you're on campus. There's a reason we're answering questions. We don't We don't BS in any way. We're not going to tell you something that's not true. So we want to be honest, and we want you to have as much information when you leave that campus to make the best decision for yourself. But more importantly, the people that raised you, they want to see what's best for you. And sometimes being influenced by the people who have loved and cared for you since day one is really important. Like me personally as a player, I was a late bloomer. I didn't commit until Easter of my senior year. Sorry, Sean, I don't mean to dive in here off this, but um, I committed to High Point University. I committed to Coach Torpy. Yeah, believe it or not, he hired me. And I did it 3 times. And there was just something that was in my dad's gut. And again, it was more so like the financial side of things. There wasn't scholarships. And it was far from home for me. And my parents had always gone to my games, whether it was my mom, my dad was at everything, right? Like I was fortunate enough where both my parents supported me through all my sports. And of course, naturally, I'm the kid that wants to go to USC or Pepperdine or like all those schools out west, and it's far away from home as possible. And High Point was a plane ride, right? So it was tough. And then another school came in with a little bit more financial security out in Wisconsin, Marquette, and it was like it felt good, but again, it was a flight, like it was far from home. I had a really good senior year, and it was a new coaching staff at Penn State, and Penn State, the previous staff had told me no. They were like, "Yeah, we're not interested." But um, I never crossed that school off my list, so my high school coach helped me throughout until I ended up in college, and Penn State came calling, and it was a great fit. It was close enough from home. If I needed to be home, I could. I was home in 3.5 hours. My dad came to every game. My mom came to every game, and at the time, I didn't take any of that into consideration. But I was always respectful, and I kept the line of communication open. And just me personally, from experience, like I'm glad I handled the entire recruiting process how I did. It was tough. The conversations I had with Coach Torpy, the conversations I had with Coach Amplo, pretty much saying like, "Hey, I'm not coming. I know I told you I was, but I'm not because I found something that's better for me." And for me right now, and looking back at it, it was a better decision for the people who supported me my whole life as well as my own personal growth because I learned how to have harder conversations. Now, I told Coach Torpy no for the third time, and he was pissed. Like I thought he was. I'm like, oh my god, that guy's never. All right, he hates me. Like I hope we don't have to play High Point, and that's how I thought. And then I played college for 4 years. I was in the corporate world for 3.5, 4 years, and then I got into college coaching, and I'm on the sideline recruiting, and John Torpy comes up to me. He's the first guy to say, "Hey, what's up? Like, great to see you. Like, I heard from Coach Nostrand you're in coaching. That's awesome." I'm like petrified looking at this guy. I thought he hated me, and we joked about it. He's like, "Dude, it's the nature of the beast." But you like, at least you had the, I won't say it, like to call me. Do you know how many kids just like ghost me, or they send an email or a text and that's it? Like, we had open dialogue, and it goes a long way because you never know, right? Like life's a weird situation. So I think being respectful, having great line of communication, and then of course keeping those who have had your best interest in mind your entire life, not just like during this process, but since you showed up in the hospital one day. I think it's really important, and we see that as coaches, right? We can ask you a million questions, we can put you through the ringer with the interview process, but at the end of the day, it's how you act and your maturity. And we have our recruits go and hang out with our guys. Like before we even have that meeting, I text all the defensemen if it's a defender on campus, like, "Hey, what do you think? Is he one of us?" Right? Like if there's any pause or any hesitation, then we're probably going to try and find out why. But if we have guys that text and say like, "This kid's the man," like he's real, like he's a guy that wants to be here, all this stuff, it's like that might move that process along a little bit faster.
Yeah,
internally.
one of the things I always like to say is, to your point, it's a small world, and the coaching carousel is also small, right? Coaches are always coming and going from different programs, and you go to these tournaments and you see all these coaches sitting side by side on the sidelines, and you'd be foolish to think that these coaches aren't talking about players, aren't talking about individuals that they've had engagements and interactions with them. It's a small enough world where I'm sure coaches are talking. So important that players, parents, all holding themselves to the highest regard when having these engagements with various programs, whether it's organizations or groups that you're interested in or not. So it was a great point to call home. I want to just open it up to the folks on the line. We've got about 4 minutes here before we wrap up. Just want to open it up to see if anybody has any questions. Please use the raise your hand feature, and I'll be able to see who's got a question online, and we'll open up the floor to you.
Sean, I saw there was one question. I don't know if it was to the entire group or just to me, but Don had asked, can you talk a bit about money, scholarships, budgets? I touched on the money and the scholarship side of things. I think budget changes at every school, right? Everyone thinks every Division I school is fully funded. It's not, right? Not every school is. Like, there's some schools that don't have 12.5 scholarships. There's a lot of talk about the whole House Settlement Act thing going from, capped roster spots and enhancing scholarships. Every school is different. Fully funded programs, I think they definitely have an advantage, right? You get 12.5 scholarships, you can use them how you please. But most of the time, like, I'll just be honest, like, most of the time, money's going to a couple positions. Face-off guys who can literally get you the ball 75% of the game, probably going to invest in that type of player. Goalies, guys who can keep the ball out of the net 65% of the game, probably going to invest in guys like that. And then you have your goal scorers, guys that can put in 50 plus points a season. You're probably going to invest in that, right? Like, if you're a fully funded program and you have great culture, your offense clicks, you've got a lot of guys in motion, you've been there a long time, like, maybe you invest in a defenseman who can stop anybody in the country because they're special. But if you find a defenseman like that who is that special at the high school age of 16, 15, you're probably not the only guy out there who's going to offer him money, right? So defensemen, love you guys. I'm one of you. There's not a lot of money in being a defenseman. If you're a short stick D midi, forget it. Like, again, if you get offered money, like I was fortunate, like, if you get offered money as a short stick D midi, there is either a high demand and somebody with scholarship left the program for that recruiting situation, or you're a freak. And if you're a freak, again, everyone else is going to be trying to get a piece of it, and there's going to be more money involved. But I'm just being honest. Like, usually by the time you can always make an offensive guy a D midi. You can always make a pull a D midi. And nothing against my D midis. You guys are the hardest working dudes. You got the hardest job on the field. And I'm not saying it because I am one, but like, you have the worst job in sports because you get yelled at all the time by your teammates, your goalies, the O guys, because you don't throw them the ball soon enough or whatever. You get yelled at for coming off the field because you don't have another 3 feet on your stick. Like, all you do is get yelled at, right? And you don't score goals. You maybe get a ground ball. You never get to throw cool checks or anything like that. Like, if you score a goal, it's like your mom is like the happiest person in the world because you're not getting yelled at, right? So, like, it's funny that the guys that get the most praise, they're going to get the money. The guys that get no praise, they're not going to get any money. That's just kind of the name of the game in scholarships. That's how we kind of do things. But we try and make an emphasis to make sure we praise those guys and take them to lunch every now and then. So, but yeah, just wanted to just touch on like the budget side of things and how scholarships work at the D1, even D2 level.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate that. I'm not seeing any other questions pop up here, but So we'll wrap up. Thanks, Coach, for sharing your time and the insights with us tonight. The perspective on the process, the qualities you look for in players, advice
Quick
that
one.
you're providing will certainly. We got another question, Coach?
Yeah, D1, D2 have scholarships. D3 don't have scholarships, but can you touch on the money that they do have?
Yeah. So I talked about merit. Every school has like different merit opportunities, and most of the time that just comes with your your GPA, maybe test scores. Every school is different. So being great in the classroom, sometimes when you just apply to the school or you can set in your transcripts, sometimes your GPA just gets you a huge discount, right? Because it's just it's an opportunity for the school to get a student that brings great value to their academic standards, right? So if you have like a 3.5, they're going to give you a little bit more money than the 2.8 student. Now they both might be able to get in to that school, but it just gives you opportunities. That's on the merit side, and that's different. That's different from school to school. And some schools allow you to stack that on top of financial aid and then on top of individual scholarships. And what I mean by individual scholarships is a lot of schools will have endowed scholarships for if you want to be an environmental science major, right? You can apply with your application, but you might have to write an essay. You might have to interview with the school. If you apply to the honors college at that school, sometimes they give you more money on top of the merit. But some schools they won't let you stack. They kind of say like, hey, you've got X amount of dollars in merit, you got X amount of dollars in scholarship, and you got the financial aid package. Like you got to pick one of the three. And that's when it comes down to the family choosing the best financial package or moving on from that institution because none of them work out.
Okay, great.
Awesome. Thanks, Coach. Appreciate it.
Get a lot of thank yous.
Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of thank yous, and we appreciate everybody coming.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much. This conversation is just the beginning of what we hope will be an ongoing series of discussions designed to help equip players and their families with the tools and knowledge necessary to succeed both on and off the field, especially during the recruiting process for those that are embarking on that journey. We're excited to continue to bring voices like Coach Chakey to offer valuable guidance and insights through this process. And as always, if you have any questions or need specific advice, don't hesitate to reach out to the team here at Red Devils. We're here to support you every step of the way, and happy to help in guiding you through the process here. Stay tuned for some more conversations around the recruiting process as we get into more of the blocking and tackling around the recruiting process specifically. We'll hold more sessions like this in the very near future to dive a bit further into it. With that, thanks, Coach Chakey, for joining us tonight. A big thank you for taking the time out of your schedule and away from your family to be with us. Really, really thankful for you taking this time.
Yeah, no problem. And last thing I'll say, guys, if you want to play at Brown, you better wake up at 4 a.m. every day because we practice in the morning. So that's another piece that you got to find out. If you really want it, you got to wake up every day. So I've been up since 4 a.m. getting after it. So you can probably tell I'm a little crazy. So you got to match it. And you got to imagine the rest of the staff. We're just as crazy, and so are our guys. So you got to really love this thing if you want to play at the highest level. And I think you've got the last thing I'll say before I let everyone go. It's you've got people who run your organization, Sean, Scott, and a lot of other coaches in that area who love the game for the right reasons and coach you guys for the right reasons. There are a lot more people out there that don't coach or communicate their passions for the right reasons, but you got two guys right here, and I know Coach Chris, Coach Corey. Yeah, sure, I'll throw Cap in there. Like you got guys that really love the game for the right reasons and want to see it grow, not just on the the big level, but in each and every one of you guys individually. Sometimes it's tough love, sometimes it's really shown, but tough love, it pays off, that's for sure. Thank you guys.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that, Coach. Appreciate it. Appreciate your time. We'll be in touch soon.
Seeing you.
Sounds good.
See you, everybody.
Thank you.